Thank you for watching the Shikama Live Show with your host, Shikama. This video is simply a test of a new location. I'm testing lighting, different lighting, and in a different location to get a better background. So, in order to do a test, I'm gonna tell you a story. So years ago, I came across a story about a Florida gang, and in the newspaper, it was on local TV, and then it was on the History Channel or 2020 or something like that, that did a documentary and blew the story up for national attention. Now, what caught me and made me research further into this was that they said this gang was more violent than the mafia had been in its heyday in Florida, in all of Florida. So I thought, well, man, this just must be the most outrageous gang. So in the local news story, they were asking to raise tax money to create a special police gang unit division. This division, they outfitted with all of the latest bulletproof vests, the latest automatic weapons, handguns, rifles, tanks, and other vehicles, and it came out to millions of dollars for this gang unit task force. So the people had, paid their tax dollars, raised it, and created this gang unit. So I looked into the gang. I looked into the entire history of that area of Florida, all the way back to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s for the mafia in its heyday. That's what they said, right? I then looked at the gang, and then I got reports where they had interviewed people who had moved out of the area and who had been in the gang. It come to find out the gang that they were talking about, that they were making everybody afraid of, and had on History Channel or 2020, it was whatever it was one of those things. I believe it was History Channel, that they were so violent. Come to find out that the gang wasn't a gang at all. It was a group of young men who hung out in the neighborhood on the stoop, drinking beer. They fixed cars. They had little car contest of pimp my ride, whose ride was the best looking and didn't do the most tricks. They didn't sell any drugs. Almost none of them owned handguns. Literally, there was nothing to this quote-unquote gang. And in fact, as of the time of the reporting of the local report, there had not been any violence in the entire area for 10 years. But how did they get the taxes? They flashed the pictures of the people, of the supposed quote-unquote gang members, and all of the gang members, of course, were black. So they really took that county and created that task force, that gang unit task force, and literally the task force didn't do anything. People were saying that there was like, the task force never leaves the police department because there's nothing to do. So they spent millions of dollars, raised the taxes for the local population in that county for absolutely nothing. They scared the population for absolutely nothing and scared them into handing over taxes. And that, my friend, is exactly what I believe is going on across the United States. I was watching a documentary about the police state, and one of the experts says that across the United States, there is no reason that you have such an amount of police. Now, for you all who don't know anything about crime or criminology or anything like that, or have never seen a cop, or have never seen a crime or don't keep track or don't do any research yourself, I'm going to tell you how they track crime. They track crime and measure it by the per 100,000 people population in the area. So 1 out of 100,000 people is estimated to commit a crime. And so then they gauge how many hundreds of thousands of people per crime. Sometimes it's 250,000 people per crime. I looked up how many people, what's the percentage of the population who will commit murder. Very specific. I know they have the data, right? So I looked it up, and guess what they said? In the entire population of the United States, 72 people will commit murder in their lifetime. Now, I don't know if that's 72 individual will kill one person, or it has to mean that 72 people will be murderers. Whether that's one person, 10 people, 20 people, what have you, right? And crime has been in free fall since the 1940s. After the mafia left, right? After all that prohibition left. So this story made absolute sense to me. There was no crime. There was no gang. They flashed some pictures of some black people, and the Floridians were tricked into paying millions of dollars in tax money to outfit this gang unit task force for the police department of the county, who never left the police department. The only thing that was ever needed was patrol cars from the local police. The area was not rife. And what's funny is, here's the kicker. You had other units in the police department who were insulted. They flat out said there is no need for this task force. Nothing ever happens in that area, and the quote-unquote gang that you're talking about is not a gang. These are policemen versus policemen. So I don't know who was getting the millions of dollars, but that's what everything came down to. They got the money. They did their snow job with the local news and the History Channel to make everybody so afraid, and they got that tax money by the millions. And they created the task force, and the task force sat on their butts, with their thumbs up their butts, if you will. This is happening all across the United States. And we are overpopulating the police. So I said, why do we have so many police people and 100,000? So this is how it all comes together. For an area, and this is all the way from the 20s. For an area, you literally need 1 or 2 police for an entire area. Why? Because most people do not commit crimes. We're talking crimes. I'm not talking about you ran a stop sign. I'm not talking about you jaywalked. I'm not talking about you walked on the public grass. I'm not talking about tickets. I'm not talking about violations. I'm not talking about breaching regulations. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about crime. So when people say this is a police state, you better believe it, because there is no need for all of those police. There's no need. Even the most they always say, this area is crime ridden. So I moved into this area, and they said, it's just so bad in this area. And I went directly to the police website, and they had on there a map that showed you, and it was a fantastic map. Murder, muggings without a weapon, muggings with a weapon, domestic calls, street altercations, and literally in a year in this supposed quote-unquote crime-ridden area or bad area. It's not crime-ridden. They said bad. In this quote-unquote bad area, they had 1 or 2 of each of those things. That's with a weapon, without a weapon, domestic call. Maybe the with a weapon or without a weapon was the same exact thing. They just had levels of the same thing. There was nothing in there. And then I went to 2-mile radius, 5-mile radius, 10-mile radius, nothing in this quote-unquote bad area. Now, I don't know if that applies to Chicago. I don't know if it applies to Detroit or some area like that, or New York. I don't know how they are. You can look it up. Go to your local sheriff or police website and try and look up per area in your area, and you will be shocked at how little crime goes on in your area or in whatever area you choose to look up. It does not require hundreds of police for 1 million people, 2 million people. Hundreds? What did I say? You need 1 police or 2 for an entire area, for an entire neighborhood. 1 or 2 police. That's it. That's going to take care of all of your domestic calls, all of your muggings, all of your murders, the whole anything crime. Now, if you're talking about you need to set up a speed trap somewhere and get people on violations and stuff like that, you hire a meter maid. You don't hire a full-fledged police officer trained in the academy and all that sort of stuff. This is what is going on across the United States. We are overpopulating and funding and wasting taxpayer money on these bloated police departments who, for the most part, as far as crime is concerned, do absolutely nothing. And this is 2014. We have cell phones, we have credit cards, we have debit cards, we have electronic transactions. They do not handle that at all. In fact, a lot of police departments don't handle thievery. So the crime of thievery, anybody who's a thief and they steal stuff from you, most police departments will tell you there is nothing we can do. The police department. This is a police state not because they're traipsing down the streets in Gestapo-like formations. It's a police state because of all of that other stuff. Don't walk on the grass. You ran a stop sign. You were 2 miles over the speed limit. Stuff like that. That's not crime. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody will ever be hurt by it. And I mean, people who speed, people say, oh, but speeding's bad. No, if you speed and nobody gets hurt, you have not violated anybody else's right to life, happiness, or anything like that. Until you actually hurt somebody else, then you have something. But just speeding or any of these violations, that's why this is a police state. And these hundreds of police need something to do. They need to prove themselves. So they do stuff like go and bust into people's houses with no warrant, with no probable cause. And even with the owner saying you don't belong here, there's nothing for you here, you have no authority to be here, get out of my property, and they're shooting people and tasering people. This is why this is going on. Because you have hundreds of police who feel they need to do something and whose superiors have them do stuff. And it's human nature. If you have something, you will use it. If you have 1,000 quarters in a drawer that somebody hands you, what are you going to do? You're going to use those quarters. They have hundreds of policemen. They figure they have to do something with them. Violating personal freedoms, violating the Constitution left and right, putting police up to doing meter maid work. It doesn't require a policeman to tell you that you're speeding. You can have a meter maid who's not paid anywhere near a policeman's salary do the same exact thing. Stop you, give you a ticket, and go about your business. You don't need a full-fledged policeman for that. You don't need a full-fledged policeman in riot gear, automatic rifles, tanks rolling down the street to give people tickets. What is that about? And when was the last time you heard of a knockout, drag-out, shootout between police and somebody? And I'm not talking about these stupid false flags that you hear in the news. I'm talking about the police were shooting at people and the people were shooting back. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch my video and the Shikama Live Show.